All right, welcome on in to this very special instant reaction edition of the PWHL Puck Drop podcast. Welcome on in, Becky Kellar. Becky, it looks like you're in summer mode.
Full summer mode. The season ended. We flew home from Minnesota, and I've been all yard work, trying to open a pool and be outside whenever it's not too cold to be, which it has been a lot so far in the last 2 weeks.
Well, it looks good on you. I'm glad you can take that time and get back to some normalcy. But we had a little chaos just to kind of interrupt your week here. We had the expansion draft yesterday, and we're going to get as quick of a reaction as we can from you. In one sentence, what's your instant reaction?
Well, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think everyone's kind of that way, right? Where these teams look pretty good. And what of the six other teams, but how have they been left? I look at Vancouver, and I mean, they certainly went after some heavy hitters on the back end, right? Their D look really good. Mashmeyer and net. I think they're going to be really strong from the back end out. Seattle looked like they took a little bit different approach. Not to say that the D they got aren't great, but they got some real heavy hitters up front. With Knight, Carpenter, and Bilka's a huge addition. I mean, just like so, it looks like two maybe slightly different approaches. Both solid teams, or the core of their teams anyway, look pretty dynamite.
What did you have a reaction after the five signings? We had a little, moment to just sort of look that over. I think all of them. I think the Thompson and Jake's signing that came in pretty quickly was, the first paddle in the water. Like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, well, I kind of expected actually the same thing to happen to Montreal. So I'm actually shocked Ambrose wasn't signed. So Montreal must just be counting their lucky stars that didn't happen, because you're right, Minnesota losing two of their top D. I mean, they had such a strong blue line that, it was bound to happen. But yeah, I mean, the original signings, I think one of my first takes, and I'd had this conversation with Cheryl Pounder, and not necessarily knowing fully what the ins and outs of the business side is, or the backroom conversations, but a lot of the contracts were 1 year, and we're a little bit surprised at that they wouldn't go after some of these players for a little bit longer contracts, especially Claire Thompson first signing, and it's just a 1 year. So you might think that their first signing, where you're really going after someone, would be a little bit lengthier than that. So that was a bit of a surprise, but I don't know what the conversations were like around players, because there was a lot of them that were only 1 year.
True enough. And I had thought their contract just literally transferred over, but I think they were able to renegotiate even on the 1 year deals, that were in place. So we're some people are going to get salary cap information. At least the players agreed, and to let the agents know about that. Do you think that helps the players overall before we dig in here too deeply?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I'm actually surprised that it's not public knowledge, only because it is another other pro sports. But yeah, I think you'd like to not be blind in it, and I mean, that stuff becomes probably fairly not public, but known within that world anyway. So you might as well be upfront with it, so that you can negotiate a good contract for your player based on where you think she's at, compared to other to to the market, and compared to other players out there. And you have to think some of those draft picks and stuff were based on what the cap is and how they fit into that equation, because there's some pretty good players that didn't get picked up.
Yeah, I think the part of the reason we saw so many rookies get picked was because they were bargains. They had to sign last year when teams were pretty tight. So just guessing that they're on a little bit of a bargain contract. So, well, let's get into it. What's your first impression? Let's just do team by team, basically, starting with Vancouver, who draft or signed like a mini Team Canada in their first five picks: Thompson, Jakes, Nurse, Mashmeyer, and Jen Gardner. And then they had the first overall pick with Ashton Bell, and went from there. What's your impression?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think they went really strongly after solid D and offense from the back end. You look at Claire Thompson, Sophie Jakes; those two players can put up some big points. So I think that they're gonna rely on getting an offensive push from the back end. I was a big fan of Ashton Bells all season. I thought she was Ottawa's bestie and all year just because consistently I thought she was good in her own zone. I thought she had a tremendous playoff. So that's a huge loss for Ottawa based on how she played. And I think she actually took her game to the next level when she got left off of Canada's roster. So I think that's a huge addition and someone that can be relied on to play solid in her own zone. You take a close look. Sydney Bard as well, another rookie player who I think the league was really getting to know last year. She's got some really good skills. She can contribute offensively as well. So I think that's the expectation from that D based on what you see is that they're going to build their offense from the back end out. Definitely, I think they're going to have to look for some more high end forwards going into the draft to complement what they have. And I don't think they've released yet the draft order.
No,
So
they
correct
haven't.
me if I'm wrong. So we don't know yet when these expansion teams are going to draft or where that's going to fit in. And so what's going to be available to them. But yeah, I would say they are really good on the back end and they'll be looking for some more forwards when they come into the draft on the 24th.
Yeah, it looked, I totally agree. And even as you said off the top, Vancouver went from the D out and Seattle kind of from the forwards back in. But sticking with Vancouver for just a minute, were you surprised by any of the picks, or does any of them
No,
catch your eye?
no, I mean, I think one of the things that I know when I talked to Cheryl, we're kind of both surprised that both teams signed a goalie in their initial 5 signings. I think, you've kind of figured there's 2 really good goalies out there. You're going to get one of them. Maybe you wait until the other side's picked one before you go. So I was a little surprised it went kind of right away. Granted, I guess the opportunity to scoop up Mashmeyer, given the season she had up until injury, maybe it was just too enticing to turn down. The hard thing is you don't necessarily know in terms of what the contract values were and what they were trying to do and when they were putting that together, staying under the cap, piecing together salaries. But I mean, there's nobody on that list where I think, I think that they all have a place. It looks like maybe they were going after some power forward net drop in
Yeah.
McQuigg and Maureen. Like, are they looking at a specific identity there? Time will tell, right? Because obviously Izzy Daniels not quite that same, doesn't fit quite that same mold, but yeah, it looks a little bit maybe like they were going after that player, the one that's not afraid to go to the net.
Yeah, exactly. I think now that I see it laid out, McQuigg and Boreen kind of similar in the way they play, and maybe Gardner and Daniel a little more slick. And I mean, Denisa Shishova from Minnesota was a surprise for me just because she has the 2 years in the league and is a little more of a veteran player. But I think they're eyeing who they might get in free agency, specifically Hannah Miller. So they, or Kara Gardner Mori, the GM, was, I think, being strategic there. I mean, do you expect Hannah to go out there? I mean, would you be surprised at all if that
I
comes
don't
around?
know. I mean, I can see the appeal of going home, but I also think for someone like her, she came off of probably a career year with Toronto, which landed her a spot momentarily on Team Canada. Um, so I could also see where she would want to stay put, see if she can replicate that season and get herself to the Olympics in a Canadian jersey. So, and some of these players, like it'd be great to go home, but they've been on the road for so many years that it's not, uh, maybe doesn't have the same appeal as someone who's always been at home or always been in the Toronto area, Minnesota area, whatever the case may be. So, it wouldn't shock me if she actually is quite happy to stay where she is in Toronto, at least for the coming season.
All right, you heard it here first.
Players want to go to the Olympics, and
Yeah,
if she can do what she did with Toronto again this year, then I think her chances are pretty good, given that everything's permitted and she's okay. Which, based on what I read, she needed one more year, a little bit more time.
yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised she wants to stay put.
Well, so let's just touch on that for a second before we hop over to Seattle. There have been some, I wouldn't say negative, maybe just surprise and dismay from some of the fan bases of how deep these cuts were. And just before we got started here, you had some thoughts on that. Can you share? Because I think if there's a line down the middle, I think I am slightly to the side of this overshot what they were hoping for with the competitive balance, but I think you're slightly on the other side of that line.
Yeah, well, time will tell, right? And I mean, I look at it and go, you're creating two new teams out of only six teams. So it's not like the NHL where you were creating a new team, two new teams out of 30 teams. You only have six teams to draw on. And in a league this small, you also want to make sure you've got parity right away. I think it's one of the most attractive features of the PWHL is how close things have been. Going into that last day of the regular season this year, had, I believe it was if Montreal had lost and New York had won, they would have ended the season with 10 points between first and sixth. So, I mean, that's what you want. And so you don't want a 2, 3, 4 year process before these teams are competitive. It needs to happen immediately. So yeah, the cuts were deep, but I do think that there's going to be parity right away. Um, and it's tough because you become a fan and you have favorites. I mean, you've been to Toronto games. How many people are sitting there with a Sarah Nurse jersey where they're like, oh, shoot, what do I do with this now? So, I mean, that's the tough part. And it's also the beauty of the league in 2 years that they've grown this kind of fan base where people are that connected to their players. I think it was unfortunately, I think it was a necessary in terms of expansion that these teams become good right away. Now, let's hope it's not a Vegas thing where one of these two teams necessarily wins it the first year. That might irritate a few people, but it could happen, right? Again, it's an 8-team league, and hopefully there's enough parity that's a possibility.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you said, it's a byproduct of how well the league has done that people are this upset. So you can sort of look at it glass half full, that people have this attachment. Uh,
Listen, two
and
years ago, 2 years ago, if you'd have said to someone, okay, here's some players, I mean, most people wouldn't even know most of the people on this board. You would have known, Knight, I don't know, Carpenter, you'd have known a handful. So the fact that everyone knows all these players, they've got their particular favorite that they're upset about. It is that part is a good thing in the grand scheme of women's hockey. So,
see, there you are, keeping it real.
oh,
Glad to,
hey, I'm sitting outside and it's sunny out. I'm everything's positive today.
right, right. Okay, well, let me use that as a segue because one of my favorite players on the Scepters was Megan Carter, a protege of the Keller Pounder School of Defensive Defendery, and yeah, that one was tough. So let's hop over to the Seattle roster. Can we start with her? I mean, what a sneaky good pick. I don't know. She was the last one from Toronto. I don't know where she was in the list exactly. Let's see. She was 11th. Megan Turner sneakily stepped up and took Wilgren and Carter as just wham bam, a couple of defenders that people were hoping might sneak under the radar. So, what did you make of Carter departing as to start with?
Well, it's funny because for anyone that watched the draft last night, you would have seen Tessa Bonhomme say, "I think Toronto's going to protect Megan Carter now." Once they got to a point where they could protect another player, and they took Emma Malte, another great pick. So, yeah, I mean, I thought she had a solid season. She's just reliable, right? I think you know what you're going to get every shift from her. Big, strong, moves the puck well. You're not going to get like she's no Renata Fast in terms of like she's not going end to end with it. She's not going to be that player, can't be that player, but she is going to be a solid, 4, 5, 6 D for you, complement an offensive D. So yeah, I think that's a great pickup. Wilgren too, another young player that I
Yeah.
think heads in the league last year. So, and I say Seattle went out heavy after high end forwards, but they did pick up some solid defenders as well, to shore up that back end before the actual draft.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it now and I had sort of simplified it to Seattle has great forwards, Vancouver has great D, but look at Seattle's D really. Kayla Barnes, I mean, and then they took Aneta Terlova quickly. So, I mean, they've got a top pair right away. And then, they've got Wilgren, Carter, and Brown there as well.
Yeah.
So, like, that looks pretty
Yeah.
stacked.
You know what? It really is. I mean, you get someone like Brown who, she's going to be sort of a big, heavy presence, throws the body. So yeah, they've got kind of solid defensively as well as, Teralova, who will jump into the rush. Kayla Barnes, who's just all around really, really good. Huge loss for Montreal. But yeah, they are solid defensively for sure. I think the difference between Seattle and Vancouver is Vancouver really seemed to go after their offense from the back end, whereas Seattle's D are more just going to be solid defensively, I think.
Yeah, and then their forwards are, I mean, getting Hillary Knight and Alex Carpenter together,
Yeah.
and then let's add Hannah Bilka in the draft. So,
Well, and remembering that Hannah Bilka was injured for so much of the year that we didn't really fully see what she was. She was just starting to kind of adapt to the league, and then she was injured. So I think I have a feeling she's going to have a really, really good second season. And then you get someone like Jessie Eldridge who just can score. Like she's just a goal scorer, which that in of itself is so valuable. Julia Gosling, who it took her a while, I thought. I thought her playoff round was some of the best hockey we'd seen from her. So if she can continue to build, she can shoot the puck, right? Like most of her goals came on the power play. So if she can find a way to get more ozone time and to get open and get the puck in the ozone, she could be deadly as well. So yeah, some nice pickups there. And then Danielle Serdachny, and you and I had talked before coming on that I don't think she had the season that she wanted. And certainly not in terms of like, she played on the second line most of the year. By the end of the year, she was playing fourth line minutes, fourth line. So maybe a fresh start for her to see if she can continue to adapt to the league. It's not easy. It's different hockey than the NCAA. And there's no easy nights. Like, in the NCAA, there are nights that are not hard, especially for most of these players coming off of top teams. And that does not happen in this league. So it takes longer for some players, and she might be one that she goes to Seattle and she gets a fresh look and things change for her.
yeah, if they get, a second season, like we saw some of the rookies from the first season really bloom in the second season. So if Seattle ends up getting that from both Bilka and Serdachny, not to mention Gosling, they could be in good shape. But yeah, sneaky good looking picks there for Seattle. So both teams in great shape. And let's just kind of look backwards for, a minute or two on the remaining original six and, how they might pick up the pieces with the draft and free agency coming up here. Were you able to glimpse at who's left and did anybody have it especially tough in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I just look at these teams now and I think last year, coming off of year one into the draft for year two, these teams were all upgrading massively in the draft. And that's not necessarily the case this year. Now they're replacing parts. So I think, as a fan, there was some real excitement in the draft after year one because you're like, wow, look how much better our team is going to get. And now most of the teams are going to hope to stay kind of status quo in terms of the level of hockey that they provided. So that might be hard to see, but it's also the same boat that every team is in, is that you're now filling gaps as opposed to, I mean, how many teams just basically eliminated their fourth line after the first year with brand new players out of the draft? So that's not necessarily going to happen. So players that maybe depth players that you liked as a fan are still going to have jobs in this league for the next, year or two. But there are some talent coming out of the draft, as there's going to be every year. So I do think you're going to be able to replace some of those parts with some young players coming in.
Yeah, we don't know yet, as we said. We know New York will have the first pick, and then we don't know how, 2 through 8 are going to be distributed. But I'm looking at, for me, there were a couple of things. Montreal's defense, as you said, great that they got to keep Ambrose, but they've got a couple free agents, and they did lose Anna Wilgren. So there's some gaping holes there. And I think Boston up front, with Knight and Bilka leaving and Susanna Tapani going to free agency, I think those
Well,
those
they got to
areas
sign
were.
her. They got to get her back. I mean, she was so good, Tapani. So I think they got to figure that one out first and try to get her back. But yeah, they did lose some pieces up front and Hillary Knight year two versus Hillary Knight year one. What a difference, right? She was back to being her. So they've lost massive chunk of their offense. So they're not going to replace that with one player. But you hope that maybe you can get one or two that can develop some chemistry that can start to replace those points.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Minnesota's D, which is basically Elise Steckline and May Batherson at this point. When you look at it halfway through, it's like don't look at the soup while it's cooking because maybe this picture isn't pretty right now. But there
Yeah,
are,
well, I mean, they were so fortunate to have the D that they had. And you look at Steckline, Thompson, and Jakes, I mean, really, there's a reason that they won the Walter Cup again. That team had so much depth. And so now they're looking to replace it. Now, what I will say is, um, their depth wasn't necessary. Like their fourth line was unbelievable in playoffs, Minnesota. And so I would think to a certain extent that's a product of the personnel that they picked up and then also Ken Klee. And he got them to play the way he wanted them to play. So, he's got his work cut out for him now that he's got to kind of start from scratch in certain parts of his team. But can he do it again? I mean, he had that team buy into their identity and play it. And I mean, they drove the net hard and they forechecked hard. I mean, they were relentless and there's a reason why they won. And I mean, their top players were great, but their fourth line was incredible. So can he get that out of his team again? Would be the big question if he can somewhat replace those missing pieces.
it's true. The announcements of who's going to coach the two new teams should be coming out, and those decisions can be massive. If you have a good coach who can get the most out of their players, then that's a huge bonus added to your team. I was just looking at the more expensive players, or even what you might call the veteran players. Brianne Jenner was exposed and she wasn't picked up. Toronto did protect Blair Turnbull and they didn't lose Savannah Harmon. It looked like in going younger that it spared the veterans. So do you think the original six here, are they well set up keeping some of those more senior players, if you want to put it that way? Does that make a difference when they actually go to face Vancouver and Seattle on the ice, that they still have some of their senior members?
Yeah, I mean, those are the players you look to in terms of your leadership, and they're going to pick up some young. Obviously, there's a whole new crop of kids coming into this league that are going to make an impact right away. So they're going to replace some of those young rookies that they lost out west. I mean, it's a lot of it's going to come down to the players that you need to perform. Are you going to have somebody that comes in as a surprise? Um, do well. Like it's so hard when you look at these teams on paper. For the last 2 years, I think a bunch of us are like, New York's going to win it all, right? And
I know.
came out. So, I mean, you look at these teams on paper and you don't necessarily know until you see them on the ice and how do they play together. And does someone, you get like a Daryl Watts who had a good year in Ottawa, then she had a great year in Toronto. So can you get a player that does something like that? That's why I wonder, can a Danielle Serdachny, who did not have a great year this year in Ottawa, can she maybe become that player that she was supposed to be as a second overall pick and be a real surprise out there? That's kind of what you need because they all have the bones of, you look at every roster and there's some great players on each one of them in the original six in terms of who they protected right off the hop. I mean, they're all superstars for the most part. So who can you get outside of that can step up and sometimes that's all a player needs is, okay, so Sarah Nurse is gone now. So who steps into that role? And maybe someone goes, hey, I'm going to get more opportunity, more ice, and they can step in and fill the void.
I love hearing this, Becky. It's making me feel a little more optimistic about the leftovers.
I think what we got to get our minds around is everybody got a little worse this year. So if you took, say, just one team, if you just picked out, Ottawa and you ripped out all those players and then made them play against the teams they had to play this year, this is not going to be very good for them. But remembering that everybody lost players, that, the new teams are only sitting there with a partial roster right now, that that the quality of play in the league is probably going to take a little step back because, you've expanded, you've spread things out a little bit. So I don't think it's as dire as we all think. I think it's
Yeah, I think that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it'll be good. Like it's going to be tough to get your head around, but There'll be new players come in, there'll be players step up.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying, I think that is the right way to look at it, that maybe it's kind of going back to a year one level where, we spread it. Like you said, everybody lost their fourth line. Well, now everybody might bring back some players that were about that caliber on the kind of lower end, but that wasn't bad hockey either. So, and we might see some returning players even. Like that could be a little side bonus of adding these, I think they said 42 new spots or something like that, 40,
Well,
46
some
new
Europeans
spots.
that maybe would have never declared for the draft, but figure, hey, you know what? I'll play this year. Right? Because I know we've seen some of the Europeans that come over and their ice time was pretty limited. I mean, this is a tough league to play in. And there's all sorts of players in this league that are Canadians and Americans that are nowhere near making Team Canada or Team USA, but that are still unbelievable hockey players. So, it wasn't easy for all the Europeans coming over. So I think you might see some more of those European players come in, and they'll play more, they'll get an expanded role, and there's a lot of skill over there. So
Yeah, one name that we're definitely keeping an eye on is Michelle Carvinen. I think she's 33 or 35, uh, but she has declared for the draft. So, that's somebody that
yeah.
could add an immediate impact to your roster. A few players like that are on the horizon.
And some leadership too, right? If you look at some of these teams and what they lost, they didn't just lose players, but they lost some of their veteran leaders. Like, you took Hillary Knight out of Boston. They lost their captain as well as their leading scorer. So how are you going to replace that? No doubt there's people in the room again that can step up. But maybe, you get someone like a Karvinen who immediately comes in and that's her role when she's in Finland. Like she brings leadership. So maybe you look to that as well when you're thinking about how you're going to draft.
Yeah, so many decisions. I mean, I everybody loves to play armchair GM a little bit, and we're hearing from the GMs today on some of the reactions of what they now need to do. So there are going to be plenty of storylines over the summer to see how they fill in those gaps. I'll hit you with one more question, totally from left field before we wrap up here. Sarah Fillier was protected. And today on the call, Pascal Daou said, in fact, she's a big part of planning their future, even who they're going to talk to for free agents, and obviously an attraction to come and play with her. What do you see there? Do you see that, Matt? That her staying there and that New York market picking up with Philly in place, or anything else like that come to mind?
Well, I hope they do. I mean, she was so good with Alex Carpenter this year that obviously they got to find someone that can step in and be a complement and that can play with her. So, I think that would be the first thing that they're looking for in the draft is who can fill that role and who can play with her, complement her, get her the puck, be available for her to give them the puck. So it's not always easy sometimes with your superstars to find someone of that caliber, but I would think that that's the first thing they're looking at. I mean, she's their foundational piece, right? That's what she's their superstar that they can build around. So as long as they can keep her for years to come, um, and then hopefully they can start to gain some momentum in that market.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, have you looked at the prospects? Do you think Christina Kaltunkova is the consensus number one?
Yeah, I've read that she is, and no doubt that she could be an impact player right away. One of the hard things coming out of any other hockey, basically, other than the SDHL, is that you're coming into a contact league. And she's got the game and the body and the fit to kind of step right into this type of hockey and be good. I mean, what a coming out party for her at the Worlds. My goodness, most of us had never even heard her name. And all of a sudden, she's a superstar. So I think she's a player that could have an impact right away.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think, as you said, just the theme seems to be maybe the skilled players from the NCAA had a bigger jump, and maybe if you're a little bit more physical already, go back to Megan Carter there, just give her an extra nod. But like some of those players were a little more ready for that. But I think Kaltenkova is just going to be a beast. Really looking forward to that. So we'll wrap up with that. So you're just gonna, are you in summer mode? Are you going to the draft? Are you gonna kind of just,
It's actually my son's high school graduation is the same night. So
oh,
I'll be going to high school graduation and Yeah, but following it all. In fact, I could be that parent in the stands with like one AirPod in, and might be more entertaining than watching 200 kids walk across the stage get their high school diplomas. So I might have my iPhone out and my AirPod in, but I'll try to keep that a secret.
That's so cool. So you're the proud parent, and there'll be a bunch of proud parents there at the draft, as there were
Yeah.
last year. Well, thanks, Becky. I appreciate you kind of filling our glass the other half full, so we can feel optimistic about this going forward.
We
And
all sorts of new people coming onto these teams for everyone to cheer for. It's gonna be fine.
great.
Yeah.
Well, you just stay there on the porch, and thank you for bringing the sunshine our way. Uh, we will talk to you in the next podcast. Thanks again for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good one.